What happens when one of Britain's most outspoken television personalities comes face to face with royalty, gone rogue? You won't believe what unfolded on last night's explosive episode of Loose Women, when Denise Welch absolutely destroyed Meghan Markle in what can only be described as the most brutal takedown in daytime television history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two powerhouses collide in the most shocking confrontation we've ever witnessed. The atmosphere in the Loose Women studio was already electric as the cameras began rolling. Meghan Markle had agreed to appear on the show to discuss her latest charitable endeavors and her life post-royal duties. What should have been a standard promotional appearance quickly transformed into an absolute battlefield when Denise Welch, known for her no-nonsense approach and razor-sharp tongue, decided she wasn't going to let the former royal off easy. From the moment Meghan walked onto the set, something felt different. The usual warm welcome that Loose Women is known for was notably absent. Denise sat at the panel with her arms crossed, her expression stern and unwelcoming. The other panelists seemed to sense the tension immediately, exchanging nervous glances as Meghan took her seat across from them. "So, Meghan," Denise began, her voice dripping with barely concealed disdain, "you're here today to talk about your charity work. That's interesting, considering the charity work you abandoned when you left your royal duties behind." The studio fell silent. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath as Meghan's smile faltered for just a moment before she composed herself. "Well, Denise, I think that's a rather unfair characterization," Meghan replied, her voice steady but with a noticeable edge. "My commitment to charitable causes has never wavered. If anything, it's become stronger since I've had the freedom to pursue the causes I'm truly passionate about." Denise let out a bitter laugh that echoed through the studio. "Freedom? Is that what we're calling it now? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you threw away the biggest platform for good in the world because it was too much work." The tension in the room was palpable now. The other panelists shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly unprepared for this level of aggression. Meghan's composure began to crack slightly, her jaw tightening as she leaned forward. "I think you're being incredibly presumptuous about circumstances you know nothing about. The challenges I faced within that institution were far more complex than what the public sees." "Oh, please," Denise scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Spare us the victim narrative, love. You knew exactly what you were signing up for when you married into the royal family. You can't just pick and choose which parts of the job you want to do and then cry persecution when things get tough." The studio audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. This was not the polite, controlled discussion they had come to expect from Loose Women. This was raw, unfiltered confrontation, and it was just getting started. Meghan's voice rose slightly, the first crack in her carefully maintained facade. "You have no idea what it's like to have your every move scrutinized, your character assassinated in the press daily, to have people you've never met make judgments about your life and your choices." Denise leaned back in her chair, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "Actually, sweetheart, I've been in this business for over 30 years. I know exactly what media scrutiny feels like. The difference is, I don't run away when things get difficult. I don't abandon my responsibilities and then spend years playing the victim on American television shows." The other panelists were now looking between the two women, like spectators at a tennis match, their faces showing a mixture of fascination and horror. This was television gold, but it was also getting dangerously personal. Meghan's hands clenched in her lap as she fought to maintain her composure. "You're being completely unreasonable and, frankly, quite cruel. I came here today in good faith to discuss important issues, and you're turning this into some sort of personal attack." "Personal attack?" Denise laughed harshly. "This is journalism, love. These are the questions that need to be asked. You've spent years controlling your narrative, giving carefully orchestrated interviews where you're never challenged. Well, this isn't Oprah's couch, and I'm not going to sit here and nod along while you rewrite history." The temperature in the studio seemed to rise with each exchange. Meghan's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush of anger creeping up her neck, while Denise looked like a predator who had cornered her prey. "You talk about rewriting history," Meghan shot back, her voice now carrying a sharp edge that hadn't been there before. "But you're sitting there making assumptions based on tabloid gossip and palace briefings. You don't know the first thing about what I experienced or the reasons behind the decisions we made." Denise leaned forward aggressively, her eyes blazing. "What I know is that millions of people looked up to you. Young girls saw you as a role model, someone who proved that anyone could make it in the royal family, regardless of their background. And you threw it all away because it was too fucking hard." The curse word hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. The studio went dead silent. This was live television, and Denise Welch had just dropped an F-bomb while eviscerating a former member of the royal family. But she wasn't finished. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Meghan's voice cut through it like a blade. "Excuse me." Her tone had completely transformed now. Gone was any pretense of diplomatic politeness. The mask had finally slipped, revealing the steely determination underneath. "Did you just swear at me on live television?" Denise didn't even blink. If anything, she seemed energized by the profanity she'd just unleashed. "I did, and I'd do it again. Because someone needs to tell you the fucking truth instead of tiptoeing around your feelings like everyone else does." The second F word landed even harder than the first, sending shockwaves through the studio audience, who were now witnessing something unprecedented in daytime television. The camera operators were having a field day, switching between tight shots of both women's faces, capturing every micro-expression, every flash of anger and defiance. The director in the control room was probably having a heart attack, but the ratings were going to be astronomical. Meghan stood up abruptly from her chair, her hands shaking with rage. "I will not sit here and be spoken to like this. This is completely unprofessional and frankly disgusting behavior." Her American accent seemed more pronounced now, her composure completely shattered by Denise's relentless assault. "Sit back down," Denise commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had been in television for decades. "We're not finished here. You came on this show to promote yourself and your little projects. The least you can do is answer some honest questions about your track record." "Honest questions?" Meghan's voice was now at a pitch that could shatter glass. "These aren't questions. This is a character assassination. You're behaving like a tabloid journalist, not a professional broadcaster." She gestured wildly with her hands, her carefully styled hair beginning to fall out of place from the intensity of her movements. The other panelists were now looking genuinely frightened. This had gone far beyond anything they had ever experienced on the show. One of them tried to interject, "Perhaps we should take a commercial break." "No," Denise cut her off sharply, never taking her eyes off Meghan. "This is exactly what needs to happen. For too long, this woman has been allowed to control the narrative, to play the victim while never being held accountable for her actions. Well, not today." Meghan's face had gone from flushed to pale, her knuckles white as she gripped the back of her chair. "You don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea what it's like to be subjected to the kind of treatment I received. The racism, the constant attacks, the complete lack of support from the institution." "Oh, here we go again," Denise exploded, throwing her hands up in the air. "Every single time you're challenged, you pull out the race card. Yes, there were some disgraceful headlines, and yes, some of the coverage was absolutely unacceptable. But that doesn't give you a free pass to abandon your duties and then spend years trashing the royal family on international television." The studio was now in complete chaos. Members of the production team were frantically trying to figure out how to handle this situation, while the audience sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were witnessing. This was supposed to be a light, daytime talk show, not a gladiatorial arena. Meghan's voice cracked with emotion, but it was anger, not sadness. "You are completely out of line. I did not trash anyone. I told my truth, something you clearly wouldn't understand, since you seem more interested in perpetuating lies and gossip than actual journalism." Denise let out another harsh laugh. Your truth cost the taxpayers millions of pounds. Your truth damaged the reputation of an institution that has served this country for centuries. Your truth was nothing more than a carefully orchestrated PR campaign designed to make you look like a victim while you signed lucrative deals with Netflix and Spotify. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Meghan's eyes widened in shock, as if she couldn't believe someone had actually said those words to her face on national television. For a moment, she seemed at a loss for words, her mouth opening and closing without any sound coming out. But then the fury returned with a vengeance. How dare you reduce my experiences to a PR campaign? How dare you minimize the very real pain and trauma I endured? You're nothing more than a bitter, jealous woman who can't stand seeing someone else succeed. That was the breaking point. Denise shot up from her chair so fast it nearly toppled over. Jealous? Jealous? Her voice echoed through the studio with such force that everyone jumped. I've been working in this industry since before you were even thinking about fame, sweetheart. I've earned my place here through decades of hard work, not by marrying into it and then running away when things got tough. The confrontation had now reached a fever pitch that no one could have anticipated. Both women were standing, facing each other across the coffee table like fighters in a ring, neither willing to back down. The air between them crackled with hostility, so intense it was almost visible. Meghan's voice was now a venomous hiss. You know nothing about hard work. You've spent your entire career stirring up drama and controversy because you have no actual talent. You're a washed-up has been desperately clinging to relevance by attacking people who are actually making a difference in the world. The insult hit its mark. Denise's face went white with rage, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. For a terrifying moment, it looked like she might actually lunge across the table. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and everyone in the studio held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Then Denise spoke, and her voice was so low and dangerous that it made everyone's blood run cold. You want to talk about talent, love? Let me tell you something about talent. Talent is showing up every single day for 30 years, through personal struggles, through public humiliation, through criticism that would break most people. Talent is not running away to California the moment things get difficult, and then having the absolute fucking audacity to come back here and lecture us about making a difference. The profanity seemed to give her more power, more authority. She was completely in control now, while Meghan looked increasingly desperate and cornered. You think you're making a difference? You're making a mockery of everything that institution stood for. You're a quitter, plain and simple. And the worst part is, you've convinced yourself that you're some kind of victim when, really, you're just a spoiled brat who couldn't handle the heat. Meghan's voice was shaking with fury now, her carefully maintained public persona completely shattered. You are the most vile, disgusting excuse for a human being I have ever encountered. How dare you speak to me like this? I am a mother, I am a wife, I am a woman who has achieved more in my lifetime than you ever will in yours. But Denise wasn't finished. She stepped closer to the table, her eyes blazing with righteous indignation. A mother? Yes, let's talk about that. You're a mother who dragged her children away from their grandfather, their cousins, their heritage, all because you couldn't be bothered to do the job you signed up for. You're a mother who is raising those children to believe that running away is an acceptable response to adversity. The audience gasped. This had gone beyond personal attack into territory that felt genuinely cruel, but Meghan wasn't backing down either. Her voice rose to a shriek that could probably be heard in the next studio. You crossed a line mentioning my children. You have no right to speak about my family. I have every right, Denise roared back. Because your family's actions affect millions of people. You don't get to hide behind motherhood when you've made your children's lives a public spectacle for your own financial gain. The other panelists were now openly panicking. One of them was frantically gesturing to the production team, trying to get someone to intervene. But it was like watching a train wreck. Nobody could look away, and nobody seemed to know how to stop it. Meghan was now visibly trembling with rage. I will not stand here and listen to another second of this abuse. You are nothing but a bitter, jealous, pathetic woman who gets her kicks from tearing down successful people because your own life is such a failure. That was the final straw. Denise's composure, which had been hanging by a thread, finally snapped completely. My life is a failure. My life is a failure. Her voice reached a volume that was almost inhuman. I've been working in this industry since you were in diapers. I've raised children. I've survived addiction. I've overcome more challenges than you could even imagine, and I've done it all without abandoning my responsibilities or blaming everyone else for my problems. The raw emotion in her voice was shocking. This wasn't just about Meghan anymore. This was decades of frustration, of watching entitled people get opportunities they didn't deserve, of seeing hard-working professionals dismissed in favor of celebrity culture. It was brutal and honest and completely unfiltered. Meghan seemed to realize she had pushed too far. For the first time since the confrontation began, she looked genuinely afraid. Denise was no longer just an aggressive interviewer. She was a force of nature, someone who had been pushed beyond her breaking point. "You know what the real tragedy is?" Denise continued, her voice now carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "There are millions of young women who looked up to you. They saw you as proof that anyone could make it, that love could conquer all, that fairy tales could come true. And you destroyed that dream because you were too weak, too selfish, and too entitled to do the fucking work." Meghan's face crumpled, but not with sadness, with pure, unadulterated rage. "I'm done with this. I'm not going to sit here and be abused by some washed-up soap star who thinks attacking me will somehow make her relevant again." She turned toward the exit, her designer heels clicking furiously against the studio floor. But Denise wasn't finished with her yet. "That's right. Run away again. It's what you do best. When things get tough, Meghan Markle runs away. You ran from acting when it got too hard. You ran from royal duties when they got too demanding. And now you're running from this interview because you can't handle being held accountable for your actions." Meghan spun around one final time, her face a mask of pure hatred. "Go to hell, Denise. You and everyone else who thinks they have the right to judge me can go straight to hell." The profanity sounded strange coming from her usually polished voice, but it was clear that all pretense had been abandoned. "I'm already there, sweetheart," Denise called after her, "and it's still better than being in your self-righteous, victim-playing world." The studio doors slammed shut with such force that they echoed through the entire space. Meghan Markle had officially stormed off the set of Loose Women, leaving behind a stunned audience and a production team that was probably already calculating the lawsuits they'd be facing. Denise slowly sat back down in her chair, her chest heaving from the intensity of the confrontation. The silence that followed was deafening. For several long moments, nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody even seemed to breathe. Finally, Denise looked directly into the camera, her hair disheveled, her makeup slightly smeared, but her eyes blazing with satisfaction. "Well," she said, her voice still carrying traces of the fury that had just exploded across the studio, "that's what happens when you try to control the narrative on my show. Sometimes the truth hurts, and sometimes people can't handle hearing it." She paused, taking a deep breath as if collecting herself, then continued. "Ladies and gentlemen, that was Meghan Markle's last appearance on Loose Women. Some guests come here ready to have honest conversations about their lives and their choices. Others come here expecting to be treated with kid gloves and fed softball questions. Well, we don't do softball here." The camera slowly pulled back to show the entire panel, the empty chair where Meghan had been sitting serving as a stark reminder of what had just transpired. The other panelists looked shell-shocked, still processing the nuclear exchange they had just witnessed. As the show cut to what would undoubtedly be a very long commercial break, one thing was absolutely certain. This was a television moment that would be talked about, analyzed, and replayed for years to come. Denise Welch had done exactly what she set out to do. She had refused to let Meghan Markle control the narrative, and in doing so, she had created the most explosive confrontation in daytime television history.